Emily Carter wasn't your average 12-year-old. While most kids her age obsessed over cartoons or TikTok dances, Emily was fascinated with airplanes. Not just fascinated, obsessed. Her bedroom wall was covered in aviation posters, her bookshelves stacked with airplane manuals, and her tablet hosted the most advanced flight simulator available. She could rattle off the specs of a Boeing 737 better than some adults. But despite her knowledge, she had never actually stepped into a real cockpit. Until today. It was just after 9:00 a.m., on a warm spring morning when she and her father, Marcus Carter, boarded Flight 782 from Denver International Airport. The flight was bound for Orlando, Florida, a bittersweet destination. They weren't going for vacation. They were going to say goodbye. Emily's mother, Captain Rachel Carter, had been a highly decorated drone pilot in the U.S. Air Force. She died the year before in a training accident. Today, Emily and her father were carrying her ashes in a small velvet-lined urn packed securely in their carry-on. Their plan was to scatter the ashes into the ocean at her mother's favorite beach near Cocoa, Florida. As they walked through the jet bridge, Emily clutched her dad's hand, but her eyes scanned every detail: nose gear, fuselage seams, even the glint of the cockpit windows. This was a Boeing 737-800, a narrow-body aircraft she had flown dozens of times virtually inside the plane. They were greeted by two friendly flight attendants. One of them, a woman named Claire, noticed the way Emily stared at the cockpit. "You like planes?" she smiled. "I love them," Emily replied without hesitation. "Well, maybe the captain can wave at you before we take off." Emily grinned as they walked down the aisle to their seats, 16A and 16B, window and middle. She buckled up, pressed her face to the glass, and watched the tarmac bustle with activity. Fuel trucks, baggage handlers, crew members. Every part of the airport's living system intrigued her. Over the intercom, the pilot's voice crackled to life. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Harris speaking. We'll be taking off shortly and should be in the air for about 3 hours. Clear skies most of the way." Emily listened closely. She liked how calm and confident his voice sounded. She liked knowing the name of the person flying her plane. She wondered what he looked like, what kind of pilot he was. But mostly she imagined herself up there, flipping switches, talking to air traffic control, feeling the power of jet engines at her fingertips. The engines roared to life. The plane taxied to the runway and paused. Emily counted in her head, 5, and then the jet surged forward. Pressing her back into her seat, she smiled. Takeoff was her favorite part. Up and up they climbed, breaking through the clouds into blue sky. The seatbelt sign turned off. Her father reached into his bag and pulled out a small photo of Rachel. "She'd be proud of you," he said quietly. Emily nodded, eyes still on the sky. They were now cruising at 30,000 aft with nothing but smooth skies ahead. Flight attendants served drinks. Passengers settled in with headphones, books, and naps. It felt like every other uneventful flight Emily had ever taken. But 23 minutes later, that changed. It began with a flicker. Emily noticed at first something odd in the cockpit. She could see through the slightly ajar door when a flight attendant delivered coffee. The co-pilot, Officer Delgado, leaned back awkwardly, rubbing his eyes. His mouth moved like he was mumbling. A moment later, he slumped forward. Seconds later, Captain Harris dropped his coffee. He was sweating. Then he stopped moving entirely. Emily sat upright. "Dad, something's wrong." Her father looked confused. "What do you mean?" "The pilot. Something's wrong with them. They're not moving." Just then, the cockpit door swung open slightly and Claire, the flight attendant from earlier, rushed in. She reappeared moments later, face pale, eyes wide, her voice cracked over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a technical issue. If there is anyone on board with flight experience, please come forward." Immediately the cabin erupted into murmurs. Some passengers laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. Others whispered, "Alarm." Emily looked at her father, heart pounding. "I can do it," she said. Marcus blinked. "What?" "I know how to fly this plane. I know everything about this model. I've flown it on simulators for 3 years. I know the controls. I know the checklist. I can do this." "No, Emily, this isn't a game." "It's not," she said. "But someone has to fly this plane, Dad." The urgency in Claire's voice returned. "Please. If you know anything about aircraft, please come forward now." Emily unbuckled her seatbelt. Her knees shook as she stood. She turned back to her father. "I have to try." He hesitated and gave a slow, pained nod. With the eyes of the entire cabin on her, Emily stepped into the aisle, heart thudding like the engine of a jet. The same passengers who had dismissed the announcement now stared stunned as a child made her way toward the cockpit. The impossible was happening, and Emily Carter was about to make history at 30 Zalos and aft. Emily stood just outside the cockpit, heart pounding, her palms clammy. The flight attendant. Claire looked her up and down, confused and panicked. "Sweetheart, where are your parents?" Emily stood taller. "I'm the one who can help. I know how to fly this plane." Claire blinked, disbelieving. "You're 12. I've flown this exact model in a simulator, Boeing 737-800. I know the layout, the systems. I've landed hundreds of times in practice." There wasn't time to argue. Inside the cockpit, both Captain Harris and First Officer Delgado were completely unresponsive. Claire looked at Emily again, her lips trembling. "Okay," she whispered. "Come in." Emily stepped into the cockpit. She had dreamed of this moment her whole life. Seeing real instruments, real panels, the glare of the control screens. But this wasn't a tour. It was chaos. Both pilots were slumped in their seats, their faces pale, breathing shallow. The oxygen masks hadn't deployed. Their control yokes were tilted slightly, but the autopilot seemed to be holding the plane. "Steady for now." "Help me get them out of the seats," Emily said, her voice more confident than she felt. Claire hesitated, then moved quickly. They unbuckled the men and gently pulled them into the jump seats behind. Emily slid into the co-pilot's chair, her heart hammering. The seat was too big. Her feet barely reached the pedals, but the layout, she knew it by memory. Screens flickered with data, altitude, speed, heading. She scanned everything like she'd done 1,000 times before on her laptop. She pressed the radio button on the panel. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Flight 782. Both pilots are unconscious. Request immediate assistance. Over. Silence." She adjusted the frequency to a standard emergency channel. "Mayday. This is Flight 782. I'm in the co-pilot seat. The pilots are unconscious. I need help. Please respond." Crackling, then a voicey. "This is Jacksonville Center. Say again. Who is speaking?" Emily swallowed. "My name is Emily Carter. I'm 12 years old. The pilots are unconscious. I'm trying to control the aircraft." Silence again. Then, "Did you say 12? "Yes, but I know what I'm doing. I've flown this model in simulators." "Please, I need help." In a control tower hundreds of miles away, veteran controller Donna Walsh stared at the radio. Around her, the room went quiet. "You've got to be kidding," one technician muttered. "She's just a kid," another said. Donna leaned in and pressed the mic. "All right, Emily. My name is Donna. I'm going to help you. Can you tell me your altitude?" Emily looked at the screen. 30,000 feet. Airspeed 462 knots. Heading east-southeast. There was a pause. "That's correct," Donna said slowly. "Okay, kid, let's get you home." Emily exhaled shakily, blinking away tears she didn't have time to feel. "What happened to the pilots?" Donna spoke calmly. "We don't know yet. Probably a pressurization issue. Just focus on flying." Claire hovered nearby. Emily turned. "Can you close the door? Keep passengers calm. Don't tell them I'm a kid flying this plane. Just say we're working on it." Claire nodded. "You're amazing," she whispered, and closed the cockpit door. Emily looked back at the instrument panel. The plane was holding level, but she knew autopilot wouldn't last forever. "Okay, Donna, what do I do now?" We're going to reroute you to a smaller airport, Augusta. Regional. It's quiet, long runway, less traffic, safer. Got it, Emily said. You're doing good, Emily. Really good. Thanks, she said softly. Then came a flicker on the fuel panel. Dana, I think I see something weird. Fuel imbalance. Dana cursed under her breath. The left tank was draining faster. Okay, that's manageable. We'll balance that later. For now, I need you to manually check that your autopilot is still engaged. Can you locate the MCP? Emily found the mode control panel instantly. Yes. Heading select is on. Altitude hold is set. Perfect. Now, input new heading 112. We're going to start turning you toward Augusta. Emily adjusted the heading. The plane banked slightly to the right. It felt like the whole world moved with her. She took a deep breath. Her hands were steady. The cabin. Marcus sat gripping the armrests. Passengers murmured nervously. A young man stood up and asked the flight attendant, "What's happening?" "Who is flying the plane?" Claire smiled calmly. "We have a situation in the cockpit, but it's being handled. We'll be landing soon." She didn't say more. The truth would only cause panic. Back in the cockpit, Dana was guiding Emily through level adjustments. Lower altitude to 24,000 feet. Start a slow descent. Just ease the throttle down gently. Emily did as told. The engines roared slightly as she pulled back the throttle. The nose dipped. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly. The clouds below glowed white. Emily stared at them, amazed she was still flying, still alive, still in control. Suddenly, the cockpit lights dimmed. "Dana, something just changed." Lights flickered. "Copy that. It might be a voltage drop. Switch to backup generator." Button marked APU. Emily found it and clicked. Light stabilized. Dana breathed into her headset. "You've got the instincts of a pro, kid." Emily didn't answer. She was focusing too hard now. Every breath counted. Then she heard something she hadn't expected. Applause. Soft clapping. Muffled through the cockpit door. Someone must have told the passengers. She didn't look back. She just stared straight ahead and said quietly, "Let's get this bird on the ground." Emily Carter had never felt more alert in her life. As the aircraft banked to the right under her direction, the weight of the moment finally hit her. This was no simulation. This wasn't a game on her laptop. She was flying a real Boeing 737 with 187 passengers behind her, including her father, and there was no reset button if she got it wrong. "Emily, confirm heading 112, came Dana Walsh's voice over the headset. "Heading confirmed," Emily replied, her voice low but clear. "Altitude descending through 28,000 feet, vertical speed 500th per minute." There was a long pause from the other end of the radio. "Okay. That's exactly what I needed. You're doing fine." Dana Walsh was still trying to process everything. She had guided thousands of aircraft in her 20-year career as an air traffic controller. But this, a 12-year-old flying a jetliner solo, nothing in her training manual covered this. And yet the girl sounded focused, sharp. She wasn't panicking. Back in the cockpit, Emily scanned the displays. She recognized the blinking annunciator for the APU generator she had activated earlier. She double-checked her descent rate. The autopilot was still working for now. "Dana, what if the autopilot fails?" "We'll cross that bridge if we come to it. You've already done more than most adults could. I want to be ready, just in case." Dana smiled faintly in the tower. "All right then. If autopilot disconnects, you'll need to take manual control using the yoke and rudder pedals. But don't worry, your hands are steady, and I'll be right here." "Copy that," Emily said, hands gripping the yoke anyway. Just feeling it reminded her of her simulator back home, except this one was heavy, real, and a single mistake could cost lives. Meanwhile, in the cabin, tension rippled like static through the rows of passengers. Rumors spread. Someone claimed both pilots had heart attacks. Another whispered that terrorists were in control. But when a teenage girl quietly said she saw a kid go into the cockpit and close the door, panic began to boil beneath the surface. A man stood up. We need to know who's flying this plane. Claire, the lead flight attendant. Claire moved swiftly down the aisle. Sir, please remain calm. Are we being flown by a child? He shouted. Other passengers joined in, shouting questions. Emily's father stood now too. Everyone, please just stay calm. Sir, sit down, Claire ordered. Everything is under control? No, it isn't. She's a kid. Emily could hear the muffled yelling from behind the closed cockpit door, but she blocked it out. Focus. Ignore the noise, Dana said. Focus on me. You're doing just fine. Let's start preparing for the approach checklist. Emily nodded even though Dana couldn't see her. Okay, Emily said. Flaps still up. Speed brakes armed. Auto brakes off. Let's keep those off for now, Dana replied. Now, can you check your current indicated airspeed? Hold is at 87 knots. Perfect, let's reduce it gradually to 250. Turn the dial on your MCP. Then adjust your throttle lever slowly. Emily did as instructed. Hands steady, eyes sharp, throttle pulled, speed reducing. In the tower, Dana leaned forward, pressing her headset tighter. I'm not going to lie, kiddo. You've got nerves of steel. Not really, Emily whispered. I'm scared. Everyone's scared in the sky at some point, even the best pilots. But the best ones don't freeze. And you didn't. Behind Emily, Captain Harris groaned. She whipped around. Captain, she asked, hope rising. He didn't respond. He was pale and sweating, eyes fluttering shut again. Dana heard the noise through the cockpit mic. One of them waking up, sort of, Emily said. But he's out again. Copy. Medical is waiting on the ground. Don't worry about them right now. Let's talk about flaps. In a few minutes, I'll need you to start deploying. First stage. Understood? Okay, next up. Are you ready to handle the ILS? Emily smiled faintly. I've landed with ILS in the sim a lot. Good. We'll intercept the localizer soon. It'll help guide you straight to the runway. Outside, clouds thickened. The Georgia coastline was still distant, a soft blur of gray beneath the descending jet. A crosswind gusted against the aircraft, causing a gentle wobble. Emily gripped the yoke instinctively. Dana's voice returned. Just a gust. The autopilot will correct. The autopilot did, for now. In the control room, Dana glanced up at the radar screen. Flight 782 was descending perfectly, just like any other commercial flight. If she hadn't heard Emily's voice, she'd never have known a child was at the controls. She keyed the mic again. Emily, you're now 20 minutes from Augusta Regional. I've cleared the airspace. You'll be the only aircraft in the sky for miles. Emily's breath hitched. Okay. She glanced at a picture taped on the yoke, a photo of her mother smiling in her flight suit. Emily had put it there just after entering the cockpit. A quiet promise to the woman who inspired her love of flying. Dana, she said quietly, my mom was a pilot military. She taught me to never give up. Dana's voice softened. She'd be proud of you. You're doing something no one else has ever done. Then Emily saw it, blinking lights on the navigation display. A localizer is active. Dana, I think we're getting close. We are. Time to begin descent to 5,000 feet. Once we intercept the glide slope, we'll start the final descent. Emily adjusted altitude and rate. The plane responded beautifully. In the cabin, Claire approached Marcus. She's amazing. Claire set eyes wide with disbelief. Absolutely incredible. Marcus smiled weakly, hands still trembling. I don't know how she's doing this. She's saving all of us, Claire said. Back in the cockpit, Emily took a deep breath. All right, Dana, what's next? Dana's voice came steady, strong, and proud. Next, little captain, we land this bird. As Flight 782 descended through the thinning layers of clouds, the tension inside the cockpit was razor sharp. Every movement, every sound felt magnified. The soft hum of the engines, the gentle beeping from the avionics panel, the slow, steady voice of Dana Walsh in the tower. Emily adjusted the aircraft's altitude again, setting it to 5,000 feet per Dana's direction. She stole a glance at the horizon through the cockpit window. Patches of green land peeked between stormy clouds. Somewhere down there was Augusta Regional Airport. Her runway, her target, her finish line. "You're doing great, Emily," Dana said in her ear. "Glide slope is active. You're almost lined up with runway. We're 17. Emily responded calmly. "Copy that. Altitude 5,000. Intercepting localizer." But even as the systems responded correctly, something didn't feel right. She reached to adjust the cabin pressure switch on instinct and froze. The reading was low, very low. "Dana," she said, voice tight, "I think we've got a pressurization problem in the cabin. Could be what knocked the pilots out." Dana immediately understood the gravity. "Okay, that explains the blackout. How are you feeling?" Emily replied, "I feel okay. I think I adjusted early enough when I noticed something was wrong. But what about the passengers?" Dana answered firmly, "I'll get the medical team ready on the ground. They'll check everyone. For now, you focus on flying." Emily switched to internal intercom and addressed Claire in the cabin. "Cabin pressure is low. Please make sure passengers are seated and using oxygen if needed. Stay calm. Landing in approximately 15 minutes. Claire's voice came back slightly shaky. "Copy that, Emily. We're doing our best." Emily clicked back to ATC. "It's bad back there, Dana. People are panicking." Dana's tone softened. "I know, Lil Captain. You just hold the sky. We'll take care of the ground." But the pressure wasn't just in the cabin. It was building behind the cockpit door, too. In the cabin, panic was erupting like wildfire. A woman near row 20 was hyperventilating. A man shouted that they were going to crash. Claire and the other flight attendants raced up and down the aisle, oxygen masks in hand, trying to keep order. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, triggering another wave of fear. Emily's father, Marcus, stood up and tried to address the people around him. "Everyone, please. The person flying this plane is my daughter, and she's trained for this. She's doing everything right. Yelling won't help. We need to let her focus." Some passengers stared in stunned silence. Others sat back down, faces pale, hearts pounding. A few whispered prayers. A baby cried. The fear was thick like a fog pressing into everyone's chest. In the cockpit, Emily tuned it all out. "Okay," Dana said gently. "Let's go over our final approach checklist. You ready?" Emily nodded to herself. "Ready." Flap set to 1. Emily reached down and moved the lever. The aircraft responded smoothly, slanting slightly as the flaps extended. Flaps 1 confirmed. Speed set to 210 knots. "Set gear. Don't lower yet, but locate the control." Emily glanced. "I see it. Down lever is armed, but not engaged." "Good. You'll drop the gear when I say." Another beep. Emily's heart skipped. She glanced at a panel. Electrical voltage was dropping. "Dana, I think the electrical system's acting up again." Dana didn't hesitate. "Switch to secondary bus. Use APU power if needed." Emily flipped the necessary switches, her hand as steady as her breath. Stabilized. "Secondary system online." "You're doing better than half the regional pilots I've worked with," Dana said. Emily allowed a small smile. "Thanks." But she wasn't smiling inside, because suddenly the autopilot disengaged. A harsh warning tone blared. Her heart leapt into her throat. The yoke in front of her moved, now no longer under system control. "Autopilot just dropped!" she called. "All right, it's okay," Dana said quickly. "Just take control. Hands on the yoke, feet lightly on the rudder pedals, just like the simulator." Emily grabbed the controls, bracing herself. The plane wobbled slightly, but held course. "Got it," she said, voice tight. "You're flying, Emily. All you now," Dana breathed. This was what she had trained for, even if she never thought it would be real. Outside the window, the clouds broke open, and for the first time, Emily saw the runway lights of Augusta Regional blinking in the distance. In the tower, Dana held her breath. "She's got visual on the runway," she said into the headset. "Prepare emergency crews. This girl is bringing it in herself." On the ground, Fire trucks, ambulances, and medics raced to the ready position. The runway was cleared. Spotlights glared in the approaching darkness. Emily's voice came through again. Landing checklist. Gear down. She pulled the lever. A loud clunk sounded as the gear dropped. Green lights lit up, flaps to full. She extended the flaps carefully. The nose dipped slightly as speed decreased. Speed brake armed. Landing speed 145 knots. Perfect, Dana said. You've got final control. Stay lined up. Watch the glide path. Ease in. I'm going to hand fly it the whole way, Emily said. Dana smiled through tears. You've already flown further than most ever dare. As the plane descended through 3,000 feet, wind buffeted the fuselage. The storm, still nearby, sent sharp gusts over the treetops. Emily gripped the yoke, fighting it gently. Left crosswind, she said instinctively, adjusting rudder. You've got it. Runway lights drew nearer. The ground details were clearer now. Trees, roads, the flicker of emergency lights on the tarmac. 2,000 feet, ease her in. You're almost there. In the back, passengers clutched armrests. Some wept. Claire sat down and buckled in, her knuckles white. Marcus whispered, "Come on, Em." In the cockpit, Emily whispered to herself, "Two, I've got this, I've got this." The plane dipped into final approach. Speed steady, gear down, flaps full. She felt every vibration in the yoke. Her arms were sore, but she didn't let go. Augusta's runway stretched before her like a silver thread. In the darkness, Dana's voicey. "All right, Lil Captain. Time to bring her home." The runway lights glowed like stars, guiding a ship through the night. Emily Carter stared straight ahead, hands firm on the yoke, heart pounding in sync with the rhythmic beeping of the altitude callouts. She had landed hundreds of times in her simulator, but now her decisions weren't virtual. They were real. The plane she was flying weighed over 75 tons, and 187 souls, including her father, were counting on her. 1-500 fate. Dana's voice came through the headset. "You're looking perfect. Keep your nose level. Steady descent rate." Emily swallowed hard. Copy. Speed holding at 150 knots. Glide path centered. "Good girl," Dana whispered to herself, watching from the tower as the dot on her radar crept toward the glowing strip of tarmac. In the back of the plane, tension thickened like fog. Passengers sat stiffly, seat belts locked. One woman held a rosary, mumbling prayers. A young boy clutched his father's arm, eyes wide and wet. Marcus Carter pressed his forehead to the seat in front of him, murmuring, "Come on, Emily." Just like the sim. In the cockpit, Emily focused like never before. Dana, slight left crosswind. Adjusting rudder. Correcting for drift. You're reading the wind beautifully. Stay with the center line. The aircraft responded to her hands like a living creature. Every adjustment, every motion translated to thousands of moving parts, and she could feel all of them. Her breath was slow now, deliberate. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "Calm as your co-pilot." The wind kicked again stronger. "One sheer," Emily called out. The plane dipped slightly. Dana's voice cut in, "Hold her steady. Don't overcorrect. Ride it out." Emily leaned into the motion, nudging the yoke just enough to keep the wings level. Her grip didn't falter. The altimeter ticked down, 1,000 feet, 900, 800, far below. Fire trucks lined the runway like red toy soldiers, lights flashing in rhythm. Paramedics stood with stretchers. Reporters already crowded near the fence, cameras ready. Inside the control tower, all other communications had gone silent. Every controller had paused to watch one screen. "She's flying it in by hand," one whispered. "She's 12, another replied. "She shouldn't even be tall enough to reach the pedals." But Dana didn't take her eyes off the radar. "She's more pilot than most I've seen." 500 feet, Dana said. "Flare just above the runway. You remember what to do?" "Yes," Emily answered. "Back pressure on the yoke. Ease throttle. Let the main gear touch first. That's right. "You've got this, Lil Captain." Emily's focus tightened. She adjusted the descent rate slightly. The runway was rushing toward her now, filling the windshield. The lights blurred slightly through her watering eyes. Her fingers trembled just a bit. "Come on, Mom," she whispered. "Help me out." 30 feet, then 200, then 100 died. Emily's left hand pulled the throttle gently back. With her right, she applied slight back pressure on the yoke, the plane leveled, nose lifting slightly. "Now," she whispered. The landing gear kissed the tarmac, a soft bounce. Then the full weight of the jet settled on the runway. The tires screeched but held. Emily activated the thrust reversers like she'd done hundreds of times before, in the simulator. The roar increased. Dot. Dana shouted in her headset. "You're down. You're down." Emily applied the brakes. The aircraft slowed, rolling down the center line. Cheers erupted behind the cockpit door. Raw, emotional people cried, laughed, hugged. In the tower, Anna punched the air and wiped tears from her face. "You did it, Emily. You brought her home." But Emily didn't react. Not yet. She was still in the moment, speed decreasing, reversers off, manual braking 60 knots, turning on to taxiway Bravo. Even now she remembered the after-landing checklist. Talk about cool under pressure. Dana muttered, stunned. Dot. As the aircraft slowed to a stop near the waiting emergency teams, Emily finally leaned back in her seat. Her arms felt like jelly. Her lungs ached, but she had done it. Dot. The door behind her opened. Her father was the first to step through. His eyes were filled with tears. "You did it," he said, his voice cracking. "You did it, baby." Emily blinked at him. Was that real? He pulled her into his arms. "It was real," he whispered. "And you saved every one of us." Flight attendants and passengers gathered around the cockpit, applauding, crying, offering words of disbelief and thanks. Some took photos, others simply stared at the girl who had done the impossible. Emily looked up to see paramedics rushing in, attending to the pilots. Captain Harris was conscious now, mumbling weakly. "What happened?" he groaned. "You blacked out," the medic said. "We believe it was hypoxia. The pressure system malfunctioned. You're lucky to be alive." Harris turned his head slowly and saw Emily sitting in his seat. She flew the plane. The medic nodded and landed it perfectly. He blinked. "I need a drink." Outside the plane, as Emily stepped onto the stairs, the crowd erupted into cheers. Flashbulbs popped, reporters shouted questions. A firefighter took one look at her and said, "She's just a kid." Another replied, "No, she's a damn pilot." Emily stood there, dazed, watching the chaos unfold. But when she looked up and saw the sky again, the same sky she had come down from, it all sank in. She hadn't just flown a plane. She had made history. The storm rolled in just minutes after the landing, as if it had been chasing Flight 782 down from the sky. Thunder cracked over Augusta Regional Airport, and rain began pelting the tarmac as firefighters, medics, and airline officials rushed toward the parked aircraft. Emily Carter stood on the boarding stairs in the drizzling rain, soaked but unaware. Her mind was still back in the cockpit. Her hands on the yoke, her breath counting every foot of descent, every tick of the altimeter. "Emily." Her father's voice called gently. She turned. Marcus was there, wrapped in a thin silver rescue blanket, his expression a mix of awe, pride, and something deeper, guilt. Guilt that he had doubted her, that he had asked her to sit still when she was born to act. He climbed the stairs and pulled her into a tight embrace. "You were incredible," he whispered into her ear. "You saved my life. All of us." Emily didn't say anything. The moment was too big for words. Behind them, passengers disembarked. Some limping, some crying, most still in shock. One man stopped next to Emily, his voice trembling. "Thank you," he said. I don't know how you did it." Emily just nodded. She didn't know either. Inside the airport terminal, chaos reigned. News crews had already gathered outside, live streaming the miracle. The story had broken on social media within minutes. Child lands passenger jet trended worldwide. Videos from panicked passengers filled the internet. Some clips showed the final moments of landing. Others showed Emily exiting the cockpit. All of them were being shared and watched by millions. In a quiet corner of the terminal, Emily sat wrapped in a dry blanket, sipping hot chocolate someone had given her. Her hands had finally stopped shaking. Across from her, Dana Walsh arrived, escorted by airport security and the FAA. She knelt beside Emily and removed her headset. "You're even braver in person," Dana said with a warm smile. "You're shorter than I imagined," Emily replied. They both laughed. Dana looked into the girl's eyes. "What you did up there? It shouldn't have been possible." "You're 12. No certifications, no training. I had a simulator," Emily said. "That simulator didn't land that plane. You did." Then his voice grew serious. "You stayed calm. You handled the malfunction. You took over midair, communicated with a TC, performed a manual landing under crosswind and pressure failure. That's not a simulator response. That's a pilot's instinct." Emily looked away. "My mom used to say flying was 90% mental. The rest was heart." Dana nodded. "Your mom was right." Elsewhere in the airport, FAA investigators were already examining the aircraft. The pressurization system failure was traced to a faulty bleed air valve. Both pilots were treated for hypoxia and released into medical care. Captain Harris requested to meet Emily in private. She entered a small office where he waited, pale and leaning against a chair. "You flew my aircraft," he said, voice gravelly. "You brought her down safe." "I just tried my best," Emily replied. He studied her for a long moment. "You didn't just land the plane. You handled it like a pro. You were born for this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, his pilot wings. "I've only given these away once before. It was to my daughter on her wedding day. I'd be honored if you accepted them." Emily's eyes welled with tears. She took the wings gently. "Thank you, Captain." He smiled weakly. "No, thank you, Captain." Hours passed. Emily and her father were moved to a hotel nearby. The airline paid for the room, offered counseling, food, anything she needed, but Emily couldn't sleep. Not yet. She stood on the hotel balcony, watching lightning flash in the distance. The storm was clearing. Stars peeked through the clouds. The same sky she had flown through earlier. Her father stepped beside her. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. Alive." "Weird. That's a good answer." There was a silence between them before she asked, "Do you think Mom would have been proud?" Marcus nodded without hesitation. "She would have saluted you." Emily smiled softly. "She always said I had her stubborn streak." "She also said you had her guts," he added. Emily looked at the wings in her hand. Real wings, not made of plastic or imagination, but earned in steel and sky. "She would have wanted you to fly for real, you know," her father said. "Not just in games." "I want to," Emily said, her voice small. "I think I always have." The next morning, Emily woke to dozens of interview requests, a personal message from the president, and an invitation to visit NASA's Flight Research Center. The FAA announced it would conduct a full review, but unofficially hailed her as a hero. She wasn't just the girl who landed a plane. She was a symbol now, a miracle, a legend. In the afternoon, before boarding a quiet flight back to Denver, this time with fully conscious pilots, Emily sat in the airport cafe, writing in her notebook. Across the top, in block letters, she wrote, "Flight 782, Lessons I Learned in the Sky. Stay calm. Trust what you've learned. Never wait for someone else to act. You're braver than you think. Flying is heart, not just hands. Never underestimate a kid with a dream." She paused, then added one more. "Always sit near the cockpit just in case." By the time Emily Carter touched down in Denver the next morning, the airport felt like a red carpet. Reporters waited with cameras. TSA agents nodded in awe. Passengers whispered as she passed, some cautiously approaching to thank her. Others were simply stunned that the girl they saw on the news the night before was walking through the terminal like a regular kid. But Emily wasn't a regular kid anymore. She'd become the face of resilience and courage, a symbol of what people can do under pressure, no matter their age. Her face appeared on morning talk shows. Newspaper headlines read, "Kid Captain Saves 187 Lives." Future of Aviation. 12-year-old hero lands jet. Child pilot stuns the world. In the days that followed, everything changed. It started with a phone call from the White House. Emily and her father were invited to Washington, D.C. for a formal commendation ceremony. As they stood in the Rose Garden surrounded by media, the President of the United States shook her hand and said, "You reminded us all what courage looks like." The President leaned down and added with a smile, "You also reminded the world to listen when young people speak up." Then came an outpouring of messages from around the globe. Pilots, astronauts, teachers, school kids. Letters arrived by the hundreds. Children writing to tell Emily that she had inspired them to believe in themselves, even when others didn't. One letter from a girl in Pakistan simply read, "Before I saw you, I thought girls like us couldn't fly. Now I know we can." Emily kept that letter folded in her backpack. Major airlines offered her honorary memberships. Aviation schools offered scholarships despite her age. One flight academy even sent a leather jacket with her name embroidered on it. Captain Emily Carter. Dana Walsh, the controller who had guided her down, visited Denver to appear with Emily on national television. Sitting together on a stage, Dana described the moment she first heard Emily's voice on the radio. "I didn't hear fear," she told the audience. "I heard a pilot." The two hugged after the interview, and the host asked Emily how she kept so calm. "I imagined it like the simulator," Emily said. "Only this time, if I crashed, I wouldn't be allowed to restart." The crowd gasped, then erupted into applause. But the fame also brought pressure. The media followed Emily everywhere: school, grocery stores, even her backyard. Some classmates grew jealous, others clung to her. Everyone wanted to be near the girl who flew the plane. Emily missed being invisible. She missed being just a girl who loved clouds and engines. At night, she lay awake wondering, did I just get lucky? Would I be able to do it again? Am I really who they think I am? Marcus noticed her spiraling thoughts. One evening after a long day of interviews, he sat beside her on her bedroom floor. "You know," he said, "even real pilots doubt themselves." She looked up, eyes tired. "After your mom's first night flight, she came home in tears. Sighed. She wasn't cut out for it." "What did she do?" Emily asked. He smiled. "She went back up the next morning. And the one after that." Emily nodded slowly. "So, I should keep flying." "That's up to you," he said. "But from where I'm sitting, the sky seems to be waiting for you." Inspired again, Emily returned to the simulator, not for survival this time, but for joy. Her fingers danced over the controls, muscle memory sharpening. She started studying aircraft manuals, watching black box recreations, learning from real incident reports. She wasn't playing anymore. She was preparing. Dana connected her with a local flight instructor named Tom Harper, a retired commercial pilot with 18,000 logged hours and a dry sense of humor. On their first day at the flight club, he looked at Emily and said, "So, you landed a Boeing before passing algebra. Impressive." Emily grinned. "Well, I passed algebra eventually." Their first lesson was in a Cessna 172. Small, clunky, but perfect for beginners. As they taxied down the runway, Emily glanced out the window and felt the familiar buzz in her chest. When the wheels lifted off the ground, her heart soared. Over the next few months, Emily trained like someone with a destiny. She wasn't chasing attention, she was chasing mastery. Her name faded from the headlines, and that was okay. She preferred the quiet, the hum of an engine in the clouds. Tom often said she was a natural. She didn't just fly. She felt the aircraft. Her confidence returned not from fame but from focus. She gave a presentation on cockpit automation and how it failed on Flight 782. Her classmates, once indifferent, listened in awe. "You should be a pilot," one boy said. Afterward, she smiled. "That's the plan." By the end of summer, Emily completed her first supervised solo flight in the Cessna. When she landed, she looked over at Tom. He just nodded. "Welcome to the sky, Captain Carter." Emily stepped out of the plane. The same grin she wore on Flight 782 returning, but this time without panic or pressure. Just pride. She wasn't a miracle anymore. She was a pilot. 3 years had passed since the day Emily Carter landed Flight 782 and became a household name overnight. A frenzy of media attention had faded, replaced by something deeper, more lasting respect. Emily was now 15, and everything about her reflected the quiet confidence of someone who had truly earned their wings. No longer the trembling child with wide eyes in a Boeing cockpit, she now wore a flight suit with her name stitched proudly across the chest. Carter Ed. The cockpit was no longer a place of crisis. It had become her sanctuary. On her birthday, she was scheduled for her first flight in a twin-engine aircraft, an advanced trainer reserved for top students at her flight school. Her instructor, Tom Harper, had said only one word when she showed up that morning. "Ready?" "Always," she replied, eyes sparkling. They soared over the mountains of Colorado, the twin engines humming in perfect rhythm. The controls were more responsive, the flight faster and smoother. Emily performed barrel turns, stall recoveries, and a perfect crosswind landing. Her movements were precise. INC2. As they taxied back to the hangar, Tom looked over. "You remember what I told you the first day?" "Yeah," Emily said with a smirk. "That you don't usually train child prodigies." He grinned. "No," I said, "if you ever land a jet again, I hope I'm not on board." Emily laughed. "Well, if I do, I'll make sure the autopilot's working this time." That night, back at home, Emily sat in her room staring at a framed photograph on her wall. Flight 782 parked on the tarmac in Augusta. Below it, a small brass plate read, "In the absence of fear, there is clarity." In the heart of a child, there is flight. Next to the photo was a shadow box with her FAA pilot wings, Dana Walsh's controller badge, and Captain Harris's gifted airline wings, the ones he had personally pinned to her coat after the landing. Tokens of a moment that had changed everything. She opened her flight journal and scribbled the final entry for the day. Altitude 11,500 ft. Conditions clear. Notes: sky still feels like home. The next day brought a surprise. Emily received an invitation to speak at the International Youth Aviation Summit in Seattle. The keynote speaker that year was a renowned test pilot from NASA, Dr. Sandra Korovsky. But before the pilot could speak, Emily was called to the stage. Spotlight hit her face as she stepped up to the microphone. Hundreds of teens from around the world watched, some with notebooks ready, others with dreams behind their eyes. She took a breath. 3 years ago, she began. "I landed a jet. I had no business flying." Latter, "I was 12, scared, and I kept thinking someone else should be doing this. Someone older, someone trained, someone not me." She paused, but there was no one else. Just me. And that moment taught me something I'll never forget. Courage doesn't wait for permission. It shows up when it's needed. Silence, a few nods, then thunderous applause. After the speech, dozens of students lined up to meet her. One boy from Brazil said, "I want to be a pilot now because of you." Another girl from Japan showed Emily a drawing of her with wings. Emily signed every notebook, hugged every kid, and took every picture. But it wasn't ego driving her. It was duty. She knew the story no longer belonged just to her. It belonged to everyone who had ever doubted their worth. A few months later, Emily's father, Marcus, surprised her with a visit to the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. As they walked through the aviation wing past warplanes and moonlanders, they reached a new exhibit, Flight 782, the Miracle Descent. Emily stopped cold. Behind glass was the very cockpit seat from the aircraft. Next to it, a photo of her at 12, headset too big, eyes locked on the horizon. A plaque read, "When both pilots blacked out mid-flight, one young girl stepped up and saved 187 lives." This seat is where courage sat. Emily stood speechless. Father put a hand on her shoulder. "They asked permission to put it here. I didn't want to spoil the surprise." She blinked back tears. I don't feel like a museum piece." "You're not," he said. "You're proof. Proof that when you raise a child to believe in themselves, there are no limits." Years later, Emily Carter would become one of the youngest licensed commercial pilots in the U.S. She'd go on to study aerospace engineering and design safer cockpit systems to prevent exactly what had happened to her. In every cockpit she entered, she kept a small silver tag from Flight 782 on her keychain. When asked in an interview what moment defined her career, she didn't mention the fame, the awards, or the museum display. She said, "It wasn't when I landed the plane. It was when I realized I could have given up and didn't." Because sometimes, when the sky turns dangerous and the world starts spinning, all it takes is a 12-year-old girl who refuses to panic. And that's how legends take flight.